Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for Road to Recovery, a priority playbook for your school. We will get started in just a moment. Thank you so much for joining us. Please know the slides for today are available to you. They are added in the chat, a direct link to the slides. And as you're joining, would love to hear about your first name, your role, your location, so we can build a community here. But thank you so much for going on the road with us today. We're just going to wait a few more minutes. It looks like some more people are joining. All right, good morning. We are going to get started with a road to recovery. I'm going to turn it over to Matt and ask him to kick it off for us.
Thanks, Terry, and good morning. I'm excited to be with you all here this morning. I know our team is excited to be here for the sixth installment of the Road to Recovery. We started this series back in June 2020 when schools were looking for how to plan for the 2021 school year. And now we're looking forward to the 21-22 school year on this Road to Recovery. Big news yesterday, the state is going to be releasing the federal dollars to the state of Texas. I know other states, if you're joining us from other states, you've already received some of that stimulus dollars. But as we dig in this topic today, think about how potentially you can leverage those dollars to really plan for bringing all of your students and your staff and your families back into the school community to really accelerate learning, to plan for all the unfinished learning that the challenges of the past 13 months have created for our students. Before we get started, there will be the link to the slides in the chat, but also Lori will be adding a link to our Road to Recovery resources where you can find the recordings and slides and handouts and other resources from the first 5 Road to Recovery webinars. The slides, recording, and the other resources from today's webinar will be added to that same link, and we'll put that in the follow-up email. Be sure to tag at E3 Alliance when you tweet or post about your learning today. We'd love to be able to interact with you on social media. I know our friend Edgar is here in Clinton ISD out in West Texas. We're excited to see you. We hang out in the Twitter world quite regularly. So please engage with us on social media. But also, if you have any questions that come up today during the webinar, please use the Q&A feature. Our team will organize those questions and make sure that Terry and I spend some time answering them throughout today's webinar. We are all part of a team at E3 Alliance, a nonprofit based in Austin, Texas, whose mission is to transform education systems through data and collaboration so all students succeed. That all students is very important to us because equity is a core value of ours, and we really want to make sure all students are successful. And as we think through this last 13 months and you think through your different student groups, your different race groups on your campuses, which students are struggling, which students have been challenged by the crisis we've been dealing with COVID-19, and which students are going to need more to be successful in the upcoming year and in future years. Your presenters today will be myself and my teammate, Terry Clement. We will also have our moderators, Lori Davis and Leticia Maynard, who will be working the chat and organizing the different resources and the questions you have. So we're once again glad to be here with you today and to dig into this learning. This past year has challenged everything about life, but more importantly, school and learning. The Road to Recovery is a tool that has helped guide school leaders by providing a structure for planning, a way to focus on what is most important, and support you with exactly how to get the work done. Let's remind ourselves about where we have been in the journey on the way to recovery. So as you see, we started with the crisis, but we are now working through this transition phase that you see in the middle. throughout this school year. Reentry into the 2021 school year varied from school to school, but we're all nearing the recovery phase, hooray, of the transition, either toward the end of this year or through planned summer programs or looking ahead at the fall 2021. This is why we are here today. We want to plan for when school buildings are fully back in person and we start the recovery part of this timeline so that we can get to transformation. The first 5 sections of our playbook, the first of the 5 sections in our playbook is leading forward. This is the front, in the front for a reason. Full implementation of anything in a school begins with strong, purposeful, and focused leadership. Leading forward is the pathway which runs through all parts of this playbook. Next, we ensure a safe place where our staff, students, and families are healthy and secure throughout the year, sending a message that we're all in this together by ensuring students are engaging in our community. Fostering a safe place and encouraging attendance also pivots on the foundation of school culture, ensuring that everyone feels like they belong so we can get to work in closing the gap by providing equitable, high-quality instruction for all students. Today's discussion involves visioning for next year, focused on 2 areas of the playbook: leading forward with an understanding that school culture and providing a place to belong for all is going to be the foundation of healing and success in 21-22. We want to be able to consider how schools can start to plan to reintegrate, that's a big word, reintegrate all students back into your school building. Let's begin with reviewing the guiding principles of the leading forward part of our playbook. Leading forward and leading the transformation is about engaging with a team, meeting frequently with that team, ensuring shared voice and decision-making, checking the pulse, and leading a continuous improvement mindset. Also, leading forward ensures we're keeping the message strong that what was important before is still very important, and everything else that's come up from the last 13 months is important as well. So how do we integrate and align all of that work and keep the things that should be important, and get rid of the distractions, get rid of the chaos creation, and really focus on the important work. The next part of our leading the transformation part of our playbook keeps the understanding that leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. We must go to the very real practical strategies that can make this happen. The most critical of these is communication. We learned in March 2020 through the rest of the time that got us here to now April 2021, that communication has been the link to connectivity and success. So we must remember that communication from leaders, among leaders, between leaders, and all stakeholders must be frequent, explicit, transparent, and accessible to all. To wrap up this section of the playbook, leaders utilize resources, all resources to best fit the work they want to accomplish, including schedules, staffing, funding, and systems. Today, I want to spend some time on the communication section of the playbook, thinking about how do we shape communication with building a mindset. But before that, Terry and I have some clarifying questions about this part of the playbook.
Yeah, Matt, before you get into that language shaping to lead the mindsets, I know you've been working closely with school leaders from different areas, like all levels, right? Elementary, middle, high school. Can you tell us what's going on in the minds of school leaders? What are principals feeling most urgent about when they're trying to vision for next year? You know, what are they feeling urgent about?
Great question, Terry. And they're feeling urgent about a lot of things. And probably we could be asking the group of leaders that are attending this webinar today, from elementary concerns about kinder enrollment based off of how many students didn't show up to pre-K this year. How do we predict how many students are going to show up to kindergarten next year? 5th graders who have been out of school buildings for a year and now are going to be transitioning to a building in a middle school. where they may have never been. And the same thing with 8th graders transitioning to 9th graders. I know there are high school principals who are deeply concerned about all their efforts to get students here and back into the school, but then are worried if those efforts, if successful, will lead to inevitable issues of engagement. So how do we keep them here? What we know for sure that all of these are tied to school culture and the resulting climate. So I like to tell people, culture is the things you can create, your mission, your vision, your beliefs, your values, your commitment. Climate is what people feel and experience based off of all of that work. So how does it feel for students, staff, and family? And what I'm hearing from principals at all levels is that they want to focus on their school culture. They want their kids to be, their schools to be a safe haven for kids and for their staff, a place where they want to be, a place where they belong.
Right. So I'm thinking though, school culture can be kind of an elusive concept. But once school leaders dig, into exactly what culture is, and they're going to need to engage in very deliberate work, like exactly what do I do? So how exactly do you do that? Like right now in April, and also thinking about next year, but what do school leaders, what's their first step in exactly how to build a school culture that will create that place to belong?
So going back to what we talked about, the tool, one of the big tools of leading forward is communication. So leadership messaging and the language and the words we use as leaders, we can shape the language that starts to shape the mindset for our staff, for our students and our families about the challenges we're facing, but also how we're going to face them and the mindset we're going to use when we are addressing those challenges. So now let's dig back into that playbook so we can dive deeper into the how you were asking about. One of the ways is to shape communication, as the playbook notes here. But what is mindset? Sounds abstract. We've been talking about mindset for many years. Carol Dweck wrote the book many years ago, so it isn't a new word to our field, but actually how do we do that and lead mindsets as leaders on our campus? A mindset is a set of attitudes you bring to your work. As leaders, we recognize that we are at risk of being bogged down or overwhelmed by a focus on the trauma of what we and our students have been through, the instructional time that has been lost, and the unfinished learning we keep being asked to address, talk about, or account for. We are inundated with news stories, questions, and concerns about everything that went wrong this year, leaving us to see our limits and continuously looking at what we can't do. The result is a deficit mindset. As leaders, our number one move is to lead away from this. Specifically, lead the thinking away from these deficits and help your team, your students, and your community focus on the assets. What do we have? What strengths can we leverage? There are dedicated, passionate leaders and educators in your buildings who will be energized when you lead the language and the conversations and the practices of an asset mindset with a focus on healing and building even stronger relationships than before. The gains we have made over the past year because of the forced change. I think about this in March 2020. Overnight, we had to shift the way we do school. For years, we have been trying to get technology integrated into the classroom. And overnight, we had no other option. And so we had to change. When people say change is hard, well, we were kind of forced to change. So how could we leverage that change, that momentum, to really build an asset mindset around that change and the new practices that we've now integrated into everything we do? The needs of student learning, not just what's missed, but what's next. What do we need now, but also what are they going to need in the future? Considering with that asset mindset, what did we get right? What are the things that we implemented that bam, work, and that we should be doing continuously now moving forward? We can't go backwards, we can only go forward and thinking about the possibilities ahead, but bring the confidence and the default of constructive attitudes of can, We can do this. We can transform. So you may be thinking, this is a pipe dream. These are just words. But my answer is no matter what anyone tells you, words can change the world. I'm going to ask Terry to share some examples around the power of words as a part of leading forward by shaping language.
Thanks, Matt. And I 100% agree that words can change the world. So when you're planning for the mindset or leading that mindset to create a place in your school that feels amazing for staff and students, the words are where you start. For example, lots and lots of talk right now about exactly what the impact of this past year will be or has been on our students. I was actually participating in a different webinar recently, and the chat was filled with lots of comments about just what the COVID kids need and what we need to do for COVID kids. And it just did not sit well with me. It didn't feel right. We have carefully adjusted our language over the years to move away from naming people by their challenges. And if you're going to name it, then name it with an asset-based mindset, like you were just sharing, Matt. Like, let's move away from that and let's start calling them by what I know has happened. They are the resilient ones. There have been challenges and struggles, of course, but each time am face to face, whether it's virtual or in person, I see students that have learned so much from this past year, students that I believe in, students with potential to move forward, students with skills we never anticipated they would gain through something like this. The other set of terms that is also being used for obvious reasons right now are, the COVID slide, learning loss, unfinished learning, lots of talk about the best way to refer to that. And I'm just, you know what? Don't get me wrong. I am not risking toxic positivity here. I'm not denying the reality of the conditions that these terms are referring to. I know these realities will serve to fuel the urgency of all school leaders. And the educators in your building, they're all feeling the urgency because of these things. But to achieve a positive, inclusive, and supportive school culture, leaders really have to be inspirational and have a laser focus on what you're there for, the learning. So instead of reiterating these terms which focus on what's wrong, what's missing, or what we're working against, let's reach for language that is the answer. A solution focused response like this one. Our plan for meeting the needs of all students in 2021-22 will focus on an equitable, positive school culture and effective instruction. So that is an answer, a solution focused response, a powerful way to describe and name your focus for next year. Once again, words can change the world. Let's look at exactly how you would shape the language in these directions. Some sound bites you may have heard around campuses or things you might anticipate hearing or things like this. Our students have missed so much instruction, we'll never catch up. Um, but you know what? This is feedback for leaders. And in a response, being careful to use the we, because we're all in this together, you can pivot and shape the language by offering student-centered solutions, reassuring your staff of the way forward, and aligning with your commitments. We will accelerate instruction by using strategic schedules, focusing on what students need most and utilizing the most effective teaching strategies. So this is a fantastic way to shape the language when you hear that feedback of concern about that missed instruction. Another example, if you do hear someone express a concern about students resisting returning, like, oh, students aren't going to come back, or how do we get them back? Determine determine what they need to hear. Again, this is feedback for leaders. What do they need? They have a fear of students resisting reintegration back into school, and it's best to meet that with, again, that professional collaboration mindset. Express your plan to engage in deliberate culture work. Invite them into the solution, into a process that you know you have a plan for. We're going to have a problem solution committee. Please join and invite them to be a part of that process. This subcommittee will be able to brainstorm all the things that might get in the way and seek to develop the counter moves now, for a school trying to cultivate an irresistible culture, and the most engaging learning environment for their students. Depending on where you are in your journey as a school leader, this language shaping might take more consistency and practice and more time than others. For instance, there are many school leaders who had only been leading their schools just 1 to 2 years before the pandemic disruption. Um, I, I I actually know of many school leaders who were just hired last year, who just joined school as the leader just as it was getting shut down last year. So I encourage you to leverage the disruption. Start building trust by using words that build the mindset you'll need throughout the building to make your school a place to belong for all. Let's look deeper at the parts now of that section of our playbook, that guide that work of building a positive school culture. I'm going to ask Matt, to help us understand what it takes to build a place to belong for all students next year.
Yes, Terry, a place to belong is that section of our playbook that guides leaders to reignite their school culture. Now we're going to review the guiding principles of this part of the playbook and share some examples and have some more discussion. A place to belong ensures we keep connections before content. Now that's some powerful words we have to really think about. That has been one of the silver linings of COVID-19, is that we've refocused that we are educated humans, and humans need to be connected rather than just be forced information on. And we've had to really focus on connections and how do we build them and how do we strengthen them. That needs to move forward as we build a place to belong. It's all about connections. And we have to filter that through all of our leadership work by shaping the language that we've just been talking about, consistently referencing and using the words that are in your mission, your vision, and your value statements, engaging collective commitments among your staff, as a filter that the reintegration team uses to determine what's working and what's not, and focusing on healing-based practices that could be in your curriculum for a reentry camp. So that reentry camp would be at the beginning of the year, but also could go throughout the whole school year and permeate how you build relationships with students and staff. To continue this connections before content and reigniting the school culture with habits of connection, communication, relationships, shared fun, and family community engagement, they're all components that need to be fully integrated into your school culture. These are not boxes to be checked, but shoes to walk in. That's really powerful. Not boxes to be checked, but shoes to walk in, songs to sing, kept alive and guiding our behavior with each other and with our students. Within a few moments of arriving or engaging at a place, we know if we want to be there or not. I know that is what school leaders are visioning for their schools right now. Reintegration of schools literally means restore them to unity. This unity is what creates a place to belong. When you're thinking about the barriers that you might interact with as you start rolling out this work at your school, you're going to have to balance what is a student culture, student-centered culture versus a staff-centered culture. It's going to be a big barrier you're going to have to overcome. Your staff has to believe that supporting the whole child is the most important thing that we do in a school. We come to work because we want to help students be successful. We don't come to school to be teachers because it's a job. That's a different mindset, and our school isn't surrounded around what's best for adults. It's around what's best for kids, and building those relationships and connections are a big part of that. I tell this story quite a bit. I have, when I was a principal, I had visitors that would come to the school, and first couple visits, they would ask me, Matt, how did you teach your teachers to build relationships with your kids? It just is palpable. We could feel it. We could see the connections and the relationships. And at first, that question just kind of baffled me because I didn't know what they were talking about. Like, why wouldn't teachers build relationships with kids? What we didn't do anything special. We like kids. We want our kids to feel like they're a part of our family and our community. But then I had to reflect and I thought there were some strategic things that we did do to allow teachers to build relationships with kids. And it came down to this formula. We taught our teachers how to build relationships with kids, and we gave them the time and the space to do it. So if you don't plan for it in your schedule, it won't happen because teachers also have the demands of teach all this content in this short amount of time. So naturally, they're going to jump to that part of their to-do list, teach content. When we put it in the schedule to build relationships, they can't teach content. They're focused on building relationships. So you as a leader have to make sure that's a part of your schedule and a part of the work at the beginning of the year and many times throughout the year to be able to ensure that they have the time and they have the skills to do it. Terry, did you have something you wanted to add with this?
Yeah, because, Matt, you're talking so much about the things about master schedule, and that, man, that happens now, if it hasn't already been happening, right? So I think about the kind of work that has to be done right now, and oddly enough, in April, to make sure that your culture is set up for success in the fall. I think that working closely with your counselors, other stakeholders, to ensure that there's built-in time for the culture work, like you just said, Matt. Because if the time's not there, it won't happen. And it's not because people don't want it to happen; they just get busy to the other things that they're doing. So the other thing, though, I want to point out is that leaders can't do this alone. You're going to need culture captains. You're going to need a team to truly build that positive school culture. You're going to need a team of representative stakeholders from all areas: administrators, coaches, counselors, teacher leaders, maybe even student representatives on a culture team, but working together to language shape, to build the culture leading structures that we've been talking about how to shape the language, how to plan for that reentry camp that you were talking about, Matt. That work starts now. And I have an example of that roadmap for planning out the work of the team. And I want to share it with you because that work, again, starts now, and organizing it now could make all the difference for your culture in the fall. This is the example of how school leaders could convene and engage with a reintegration team. They begin by learning all they can by gathering data, not just student performance data on assessments, but survey and focus groups, maybe even interviews. Campus leaders then take everything they learn from everything they're hearing, input from all stakeholders, and they reflect on everything they're doing. And this is a big one: what to keep and what to let go based on what's working. That's one of the bravest things a leader can do, is figure out, what do we need to stop doing? It's not working the way we wanted it to, or change it. All of this goes into setting the goals for reintegration, for returning your campus to unity next year. The goal setting then extends to the rallying of the team. Leaders on in this particular sample, they used the goals to recruit the members of the team, to organize the team around what they were trying to accomplish for next year. The next step then is to convene that team in the work of planning for reintegration, which will include prioritizing tasks, convening the team now. And I know what you're thinking, like, Terry, it's almost May, but if you convene a team now, there's time to meet weekly, 4 or 5 times before the end of the school year, make progress on the work. It's shared work. This team is the foundation of leading forward and engaging in the work to create a place for all students and all staff to belong. The members of this team will start to build a set of preferred terms and positive language to shape that language. This team can also make decisions for and develop that curriculum, the content of that reentry camp that Matt talked about. This camp is for the beginning of the year, but it's not a one and done. You'll want that social, emotional, relationship building, healing support to be sustained throughout the school year. This is why the curriculum is developed in response to the needs revealed in your learning. When you listen to students, when you listen to teachers, and really take in all that input. It's not necessarily a one size fit all, but what do we need for our students to feel like they belong? Let's review a sample of what the content of a positive culture building reentry curriculum looks like. We have shared this overview in a previous webinar, but let's look again. I'm going to pause for just a second and let you glance without me talking. Let's think about why a diverse representative team of leaders at a campus would develop this content to start the year and sustain throughout the year. Dragon DNA. This is about cultural diversity and appreciation lessons. This is more urgent than ever as the pandemic year highlighted in inequities. It's never been more important to ensure that all of our students feel safe. Emotionally safe, socially safe, physically safe, and included in our school culture. To do this, they'll need explicitly inclusive experiences like building culture banners as a class, as a family, if you will. And also they'll need awareness, safety, and trust. You'll have to build that through community language and structures. This would happen in that Dragon DNA curriculum. Wellness workshops for how to manage your own stress, mental health awareness, self-care. A mindset study seminar is how we teach a mindset. We can't just tell kids to have a great attitude. Having a mindset of growth and asset takes training, and you have to teach them about their brains and how to proceed throughout their days. The Dragon Way, that could be all of your ready to learn structures about how to behave, how to move throughout the building. The Dragon Way is super important and can be worked into explicitly leading students through so they know how to be successful in your environment. And then community through communication is how you would teach restorative practices or discourse training, conflict resolution. And then believe there is good, be the good is an example of how to insert that kindness and being a good ally and being a good advocate for each other and anti-bullying. One thing I do want to point out about this content as I've shared it and as I've been sharing it over the last a few months and having discussions with school leaders, I get a lot of questions about what exactly these lessons look like. And it can vary. There are content pieces available out there that you can acquire for your school, or you can develop these together as a team from scratch, really, tailoring it to the needs of your campus and your students. But no matter how you create the lessons or the content, you just want to make sure, like as Matt sort of mentioned when he spoke of making time for it, make sure that it's a priority and that it's a system so it doesn't get sidelined or put on the back burner when other things come up. He spoke of really putting it into your schedule and communicating the message that it's important and that it's critical. If it's clearly communicated, if it's documented, it's not one and done, it's monitored and you provide feedback on it and keep strengthening it with your leadership language. This has to be a campus-wide commitment for it to really be effective. And you really want leaders to really make it part of the school community, keep it alive through their language. To help you get started in this work, we created a tool for you and your team to use. In the PDF that we shared with you before, if you come to this particular page in the PDF, there's a link to open the tool. It's a planning tool for a reentry camp with these examples kind of built in throughout of it, and even more. It's an editable spreadsheet with multiple tabs. The tool includes teams, purpose statements, schedules for planning, milestone markers. As well, you'll find several example daily schedules for reentry camps that are planned for the first few days of the school year. In that PDF, again, if you take the link and make your own copy, you can start working with this now. And you'll also want to consider how you're going to communicate all the content and the things to anticipate about this over the summer. Because we don't want to lose touch. We want to keep a strong connection with our students, with families. So once you've designed what the reentry will look like, the components and experiences can be put into sort of a campaign format so that you can use it to reach out and connect over the summer. For example, you could use social media to really push out and send a message of what you have planned. Here's a kind of an example of a post you might put out in social media about your reentry camp and how it does start the first day of school, that it's, you know, it's when we kick off school, but it is the first few days. And what it does is sends that message that here's the identity, here's a place to belong, and here are the experiences we have planned, kind of, you know, really letting them know what they're coming back to, and sending that message that your school is an irresistible place to be. So again, this super powerful, developing the content and sending out the message to really make sure they know it's a destination, it's a place they can belong. And as we return to this visual of the playbook, I just think it's spot on that a place to belong, the school culture, is positioned right next to closing the gaps, because we know the purpose of school is to ensure learning through equitable, high quality instruction for all students. But we also know that the culture in your school must be a positive, supportive one for that learning to be successful. So it feels perfect to have this conversation for next year right now. All right, I'm checking the time. It looks like we do have some time for some questions. So let's check to see if we have any questions. All right, can you, I do see a question about the reintegration team. Matt, do you want to speak to this about who should be on it, and how do you manage, you know, recruiting right now when people are tired, stressed, end of year? How do you recruit that team, and who all should be on it?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, and I think it looks different in multiple situations. What I go back to is thinking about what is it we need to define first, what we're going to do and what it's going to look like, so that then the leaders can sell it to their staff. And there's going to be people that even through the end of year hell they're going through will be hot for this, will be excited for this, and they'll want all part of it because they are kids first and they care about the kids in your community. Those would be the people I would mobilize. I would also really think about who's your next tier of leaders. Who are people that aren't formal leaders yet on your campus? And would this opportunity give them that capacity building to be able to step up and lead something on your campus? So thinking through those lenses, but I would also make sure counselors were involved, the nurse was involved, social workers, lead teachers, or the behind the lead teacher. Who's that lead teacher in waiting? You could also invite custodians. They see how kids interact in the building. They're kind of the silent person watching everything. Front office staff, seeing how people interact with each other. So I would really expand your thinking of who could really be on this team, and even potentially invite students and family members because they're a stakeholder and they have a perspective in your community as well. So there's no right answer, but it could look many different ways.
I love that idea of including students and families, maybe not for all the meetings and the work, but at least getting their voice in there. I think that's very practical. There was one other question and about we mentioned culture captains and language shaping, and exactly what did we mean by that? You may have something to add, Matt. I know that my first response is to go, there can't be anything too specific here. I mean, write it down, have conversations about exactly what language will get you to where you want to get. And then write it down, practice it with each other. Like if we're trying to shape that culture and get ready for those difficult, awkward conversations, sometimes when you're trying to get someone to change their mindset, it can be very challenging and intimidating. So practice with each other and say, you know what, we're going to be challenged with this, kind of like those examples I put up. When you hear something like this, here's how you would change, and fill people with hope and inspire them, and then practice those scenarios with each other. Because again, principals can't be assistant principals even, right? You can't be in every conversation. There are going to be conversations that go on everywhere in your campus. So I would say you should establish what the shared pivots are, the language you want, and practice, and then go out as culture captains. Anything to add to that, Matt?
Yeah, definitely. I would add that if you have a formal leadership team, one of their responsibilities should be leading culture on your campus. And if that's not clearly defined with your leadership team, then make that defined moving forward from this point, because they are the army that's going to leave a leadership team meeting, and they're going to define and they're going to execute whatever that culture is. If it's negative, they're going to be the ones that are leading it. So make sure that they know they're positive culture leaders or positive culture captains. But then as well with that team, think through, like Terry did, all the things that you might hear or you are hearing that's a negative or it's deficit language on your campus, and then group it together and say, what are the top 5 that we hear most regularly or we assume we're going to hear the most? And then as a team, design your pivot statement. And I always go back to think about politicians. They know when they go onto the press circuit, they know the questions based off of the hot topic at the moment they're going to get. And the politician and their team have designed pivot lines. They may not even answer the damn question to begin with, but they're going to have their pivot statement already crafted and they're going to execute it every time. So why aren't we doing that to build a growth positive mindset on our campuses? Because we know the things we're going to hear. This isn't new stuff. We've heard this stuff in schools for years at every school. So plan for it, practice it, and be ready to execute it with that leadership team who are your culture leaders.
Love it. Great. Thanks for that guidance, Matt. I am checking the time. It does look like we are just about out of time. So we will return, and I'm just going to ask you to go ahead and close us out, Matt, so we can honor that time.
Perfect. Yes. So leave it here today. Please use the playbook, the tools we've provided, the roadmap, which is on the resource page, anything and everything you can on the road to recovery, and more importantly, transformation. Share these tools with other district and campus leaders so you can build a culture and a recovery and a transformation learning community in your space. We know this work is hard and everyone is struggling to keep up with the news and the latest guidance and all the craziness that comes through. And it's end of year madness as well. So that's why it's important to leverage partnerships like us. So partner with us, reach out to us about complimentary coaching sessions. If you just need to talk, we're here for you because we're partners with you in this work to ensure that your students are successful, because we want all students to be successful. So again, thank you for joining us. We hope today benefited you with our learning, and we hope to see you again somewhere in the future on the road to recovery. Have a great day and a great end of your school year.